Okay, so I mentioned that the movie concentrates on certain details that were unnecessary, but in other details, it kind of washes it off, essentially. The one that they concentrated on that I thought didn't work had to do with Tommy, and that was Tommy being a war veteran. The aspect of Tommy being a war veteran was about a minute and a half of filming and of the film and of dialogue. But I understand why they decided to go that route, because they want to make Tommy more sympathetic when really he's not. He really is not that sympathetic in this movie. And in order to gain the sympathy of the audience through this, they make him out to be a hero. The quote is that he pulled the door off of a tank to save somebody from drowning, is essentially what happened. And then he walked away without getting awards, without getting any kind of accolades for it. And that is to show how much of a strong character and good person he is, even though nothing else in the movie would actually make you believe that he is. Now, granted, some of you will defend this character by saying he's obviously wounded. He's obviously somebody who's gone through a lot of shit. He has trauma. He has issues. And to expect him to be really sympathetic may be unfair. I will grant that to a certain extent. However, the film does not grant that in this. Okay? And the reason why I say this is because the main character in this movie, even though Tom Hardy gets front billing in this movie, the main character is Brendan, which is Joel Edgerton's character. You are meant to sympathize with him. He has all the things that you want in a character that you want to sympathize with. He has morals. He is of good character. He's of good sanity. He has a wife and kids. He's a family man. He's down on his luck. So you can sympathize with him on that end. He's fighting to keep his family alive, to keep his house. He is the ultimate sympathetic character. Whereas Tommy, which is Tom Hardy's character, is a drunk. He abuses pills. He has demons. He is short-tempered, I should say. He is mean. Even though his father is trying to help him, he is miserable with his father, even though there is past trauma there. He is unforgiving. He is relentless. He treats other people like crap, except for one person that is discussed in there, which is, again, the only thing that makes him sympathetic in the movie, to a certain extent. The movie itself, which I found really odd, when it came to the fight, for some strange reason, they decided to make Tommy a villain. And how they did this was in a scene where the two brothers meet in a beach before the fights. And what essentially is that Brendan is trying to connect with him, trying to open up and trying to do something to help his brother. And Tommy insults him. Tommy accuses him of things. Tommy wants nothing to do with them. And basically shits on him for even trying. And again, you can say that's the trauma talking. That's his issues talking. That's him not being a bad person. It's just somebody who's wounded, who's dealing with a lot of issues. And I get that, but this movie isn't that deep, and that's an issue. Because if you're gonna make a character that complex, you need to spend more time on that character. The example I would give you is The Wrestler. The Wrestler is about one character who has, yes, many flaws, many issues, but they give enough time and effort to that character to make him sympathetic still, even though you don't agree with what he's doing. And that's what's missing with Warrior, especially with Tommy's character, because I really feel the movie wants you to sympathize with Tommy, but the decisions that they make in this movie with Tommy makes it really hard to sympathize. And to me, it went from having this really neat dynamic where obviously these two people were going to meet at the end in the last fight. Duh. But it would have made this interesting dynamic where these two really likable, flawed human beings are going to have to fight to the death to get what they need to survive the next day. And that's added palpable drama that could have worked really well if you made Tommy more sympathetic. And they didn't. And I think that hurts this movie to a sizable degree in this. What this movie reminded me of is a movie in the 2000s called Take It to the Bone. It was with Antonio Banderas and Woody Harrelson, and they played two boxers who went on a field trip who are who are friends, but they take a road trip in order to go to I think it was a Mike Tyson fight and be in the mid card where they would face off against each other. And critics didn't like this dynamic at the time because they have you sympathize with these characters, and then you have to watch them beat the crap out of each other. To what end? And that was a flaw with Take It to the Bone. Take It to the Bone had an interesting dynamic, but and I wouldn't say failed. That's not right. It succeeded to a certain extent, but it could have been a lot better. And Warrior has that same problem, has a completely different problem, where I think that drama really could have worked, but they chickened out because either they didn't have enough time to flesh out Tommy, or the main point was to make Brendan the person that you want to sympathize with and make Tommy more into a villain, which I think hurt the film in that aspect. Let's get back into details too, because another detail that I want to talk about is Brendan's wife. And the actress who plays Brendan's wife is Jennifer Morrison, and she did a good job. Performance is not the problem. My issue is how fast this character accepts the fact that her husband's going back into fighting. And you can say, oh, well, she's about to lose the house and this and that, and she's probably... But she said multiple times throughout the entire film that, then lose the fucking house. I don't want you doing this. But then she became supportive out of nowhere in this film. And I think it would have been a much more interesting dynamic if she was debating throughout the times when the fights were going on as to whether she should root for her husband to win this or be absolutely horrified by what's about to happen to her husband when she's in these fights. It could have been, again, another interesting dynamic that really could have worked to broaden the film and to give it more color and more depth. But again, they rely on the cliche because immediately when he starts fighting, she became the overly supportive, has to root for her husband no matter what character, where in the first half of the film, that's not what she was in the first place. So, again, they I would say they wussed out on that character as well. And let me get to one other thing with the fights as well. Two big problems I had with the fights. One, there is this fighter that has been teased throughout the entire film called, I think it's Koba, and he is a Russian fighter who literally injures and destroys everybody he comes across, okay? Now, I've watched MMA before. I've watched UFC a bunch before. So I know how it works, okay? Because there are weight classes, there are rules and stuff like... I understand MMA. So I'm looking at this in this perspective. When you see Koba and you see Brendan in the same ring, the first thing I thought of when I saw that was, yo, these two aren't in the same weight class. What is this? Now, I think the tournament is meant to be a middleweight tournament, which I thought was weird because I always thought that the heavyweights were the ones that were the most popular, and to put $5 million on middleweights was, I thought, kind of strange. Maybe there's a detail I'm missing. Maybe not. Maybe I'm missing a detail. But when you look at this guy who plays Koba, and you look at Joel Edgerton, as chiseled as he was, there were no way that I would believe that Joel Edgerton had a chance against this guy. We're talking about, in my opinion, an 80-pound difference in size, about a 4-inch difference in height, probably better reach on the Koba character as well, and of course, because that's just this type of movie, Brendan wins out of nowhere against this mammoth beast. And I just sat there going, yeah, I don't buy that at all. I don't buy it in the least. Yeah, and that's always a problem with these types of films, too. They worry more about the message and getting the plot along the way they want, and they don't really take realism, or they don't take, I guess realism is the right word. They don't take that into account. They want the plot to move a certain way, and they don't do anything creative to make it interesting. This is how it is. This is how it works, and this is why it is. That is what they do in that. And that fight specifically, I was like, yeah, I don't buy that for a second. The other issue I had with the fights is in the last fight. In the last fight, it's, of course, Tommy versus Brendan. And Tommy works Brendan for a little bit and beats him in the first 2 rounds. Brendan comes back, gets him in I think it's in either an armbar or a Kimura, I forget which, and literally separates his shoulder, breaks his shoulder in the fight. Now, that's not the issue I have. The issue I have is that after he separates the shoulder, the round ends, and the fight continues? I mean, again, I've seen some MMA, and I am very certain if someone broke an arm, a leg, a foot, or whatever, a ref would say, yo, you're injured. We're done. It's over. Or a trainer would go, or a doctor would say, yo, he broke his foot. Like, no way. It's over. It's done. Like, there are fights that have been stopped because someone got poked in the eye and they can't see. You cannot make me believe that a ref would take a look at Tommy with one arm dragging and him unable to move it, but him using the other arm to punch and guard, and say, oh yeah, that's fine, whatever. No, because a ref would look at that and go, why aren't both hands up? Why is this one arm dangling? That would be the hint of, oh, we need to stop this fight. The plot contrivance of that alone ruined the final fight for me. Like, I looked at that and went, oh, come on. This fight would be over. They wouldn't allow this. Like, this was a contrivance to make Tommy more sympathetic and more, I guess more interesting and more sympathetic because of how tough and resilient he is. He was willing to fight with one arm completely broken, which at that point I was like, good God, like, really? Like, I don't believe that for a damn second. Yeah, like, it's those issues with the film that, again, went from a possible 4-star film, which to me, a 4-star film is a very good film. Is an almost great film. I generally, as principle, I don't give out 5 stars when I first see a movie. Films earn the 5 stars as time goes on, where I start to think, oh wow, it did all these interesting things, it did them very well, nothing beats it, and this deserves a 5-star. I think out of 2008 films I've seen, 48 films have gotten 5 stars from me. So for something to get a 4-star is something that I think is really good. For it to go from 4-star down to a 3-star within an hour just shows, to me, how badly the fights turned out in this. And really, I would say, not ruined the movie, but I would say lessened the quality to a certain degree. And it's a disappointment, because the drama involved in the first half of the movie, or the 2/3 of the movie, is great. It's actually very good, and I was looking forward to the fights. And I hate to say it, but I think the fights ruined it. I think the fights, to a certain extent, ruined the film, and which is sad because with most sports films, those are even though I think the best sports films don't necessarily make the best scenes the sports scenes, quote unquote, but they still need to be good. They still need to be engaging, and they just weren't in this. I watched this movie and went, wow, that's a disappointment. That could have been a lot better. So now we're done with spoilers. I'll get to my final thoughts. Warrior is a good movie. It could have been a great movie, but it's good, which is unfortunate. I think there's definitely some good performances in the movie. I think that Joel Edgerton has the best performance in the movie, followed by Nick Nolte and then Tom Hardy. All three actors were very good. I had a lot of problems with the last hour of the film, especially in relation to the first two acts of the film, which set up the drama very well, but then cratered the entire thing, and cratered the entire movie into just a good movie, which is sad. I was genuinely sad that it went the route it did. This movie went from a great movie to a good sports movie, which is what I find pretty disappointing. I think at this point, like, I'm grading it on a handicap because it's a sports movie, and I'm used to sports movies being contrived to a certain extent and to be cliched, and this movie has all the cliches in it, but it could have been a lot more, and they flirted with it being more than what it was, and it just didn't stick the landing. It's a good movie, not great, but I just ended the movie disappointed, and it's sad, really, because I think this could have been. I think it was gearing up to be one of the best sports movies out there. I think in relation to sports movies, it's Bull Durham, Hoop Dreams, and When We Were Kings. I think are probably the best sports movies. But if you want narrative, it'll be. I just said Bull Durham, A League of Their Own, He Got Game. I think are the three best sports movies out there, narrative-wise. So if you don't want to count documentaries, those are the best three. But yeah, disappointing but good. If you're into sports movies and you haven't watched it, I would definitely recommend it. But if you are looking for a great sports movie that's great as a movie and not just a sports movie, unfortunately, it doesn't fit the bill.